your host, John MacDonald.
Hello and welcome. I'm visiting today with Senator and former House member Scott Sales. Welcome. Appreciate you taking a little bit of time to stop by and visit with us today.
You bet.
So tell me a little bit. I know you've had a long career in the legislature. Tell us a little bit about the time that you've spent there and
Sure.
and some of your experiences.
Well, by today's standards, it's a long time with term limits. Came into the legislature the first time, ran in 2002, and was privileged to get elected. I stood for re-election 3 times in the House and was successful all 3 times. Also had the privilege of being Speaker of the House in 2007, and in a tied House, 50-50, I had the post of Republican leader. I sat out for 2 years, and then I ran for the Senate again in 12, or I should say for the first time, and then I've represented the people of northern Gallatin County and Broadwater County, and just recently after redistricting, now I have the eastern, maybe 15-20% of Lewis and Clark County too. So those are the new voters that I haven't represented in the past, and some people in the western part of Gallatin, North Gallatin County too,
right.
Manhattan, Churchill. That's a new area for me if I choose to run for re-election. But I did represent them supposedly, or effectively, in this last legislative session.
Some new people in your district, obviously.
Yeah, I'm familiar with a lot of folks in at least the Gallatin County portion of the district. I'm obviously very new to the folks east of East Helena all the way up to Cascade County that I represent now.
So you've just wrapped up your second session in the Senate.
That's correct.
Tell me some of the highlights and areas that were of particular interest to you and some of the outcomes.
Well, probably, and I don't know how closely the viewers see, but there's a lot less consternation and in-party fighting for the Republicans in the 15 session versus the 13, so that was more enjoyable. Unfortunately, as a conservative, government continued to grow at a pace that I don't think is sustainable or, that's connected to the private sector growth that supports government. We've seen basically another 6 to 8% increase in the general fund budget, and or I should say all funds again. We haven't seen that type of growth in the private sector, unfortunately, for several years. So government, in my opinion, is growing at a rate that's not sustainable. The private sector needs to get caught up. But instead of returning some of the excess funds that supposedly that we have back to the private sector where that can be reinvested to hire new people and to pay for new plant and equipment, we've just continued to spend it on more government. And obviously there were some things that I thought that weren't in the best interest of the state, especially from a private sector standpoint. The Medicaid expansion, even though the federal government supposedly is going to pick up the lion's share of that cost originally, we all know that the feds are broke. $18 trillion deficit. At some point they're going to have to face the music that they can't continue to spend money they don't have. And a state like Montana that has a 42% reliance, or roughly therein, of our state budget being federal dollars, it's going to have a major impact on us down the road. And I don't know how we're going to really frankly pay for it when the federal government decides and comes to the conclusion that we all know that they can't continue to spend the way they are.
So given that opinion, what do you think that the state of Montana ought to be doing, or next session, what type of things will you try to be pursuing?
Well, I've the entire 6 sessions I've been in Helena, I've been a champion of the taxpayer and a champion of a smaller, more efficient government that relies more on private sector job creation. I think we need to get back to that. The best health care program that anybody can have is a decent job so they can buy their own. We need more competition, less government interference. These are the type of things that historically have made America and the state of Montana competitive and great on the world stage. And I think we need to get back to that. Unfortunately, we've continued down this path of a more cradle to grave society that thinks that the government's responsible for all of our shortcomings, our failures, and our successes. We need to, in my opinion, we need to get back to what I think America has been based on, which is more of a free enterprise. Now, granted, there's people I serve with that like government interference in the private sector. I actually abhor that more than I do the social safety net in terms of providing benefits for people. I don't like corporate welfare. I'd like government to have less interference in the private sector and make the private sector stand on its own. And the government should be more of a benevolent overseer that makes sure that you get fair treatment in the courts, that you're treated fairly across the board, that provides for the common defense, the common good, the common welfare. And when I say welfare, I don't necessarily mean handouts or entitlements for people. Welfare used to mean, if you look back, like in the Webster's Dictionary of around the time of the founding up through the Civil War, welfare meant it needed to be applied equally to all citizens, not benefits for one person that you take at the expense of another. So that would include highways, that would include obviously defense and health issues and that type of thing at a larger, more global scale.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's a little different philosophy than what a lot of people have become accustomed to, obviously.
Right. Before we wrap up, let me ask you a little bit about what you see coming down for the 2017 session. We're a couple years off, but I know the convention is meeting today. This is obviously a time when you're discussing these issues. What do you see on the horizon?
Well, I think it's going to be good. 17 is going to be a decent year for Republicans. I think there's an opportunity that we could actually pick up a couple more seats in the Senate. It wouldn't surprise me if we're at 31. There's 2 seats currently in the Senate that are occupied by Democrats that are Republican seats. The current seat that Brad Hamlet is in, he was moved out into Jim Peterson's old seat, which is in the Judith Basin area and all the way out to Circle. That's going to go Republican for sure. Also another seat that's being vacated because of term limits is Christine Kaufman's seat, which is right here part of Lewis and Clark County, but I think it includes Pyle and part of Deer Lodge County. There's a high probability that can end up going Republican too. So I think it's going to be a good year, at least for the Senate. I'm not as familiar with what could potentially happen in the House. So I'm confident that we're going to retain our majority in the Senate and grow it. I'm hoping that we're going to get more freedom-minded individuals to get elected this time that are going to maybe resist this growth of government that we've seen continually coming at us for a long period of time. And, it's going to be the same. It's all about money. It always has been.
Sure.
It's, I've seen the budget more than double or probably roughly double since I've been there in 12 years. At some point, it's got to reverse that course because, like I said, there's a lot of debt. Economy's not as strong, and it's all based upon taxes being paid by the private sector.
Yeah.
And right now, that's not that scale is tipping more toward the public sector, not the private sector.
Right. Well, it sounds like 2017 will certainly be an interesting session for sure.
It always is. I've never been bored.
Yeah. Senator, I appreciate you stopping by and visiting with us. Again, we've been talking with Senator Scott Sayles. We appreciate you coming by. I know you've got a busy schedule today, but thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate
it
a
lot.
Thank you.
Charter Local Edition has been an exclusive presentation of Charter Communications.